Ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, this is DebateSensei Limited Prep Edition, where we talk about topics that are relevant to competitive limited prep debate. Mainly IPDA, but also NPDA. We got ourselves our experts, Matt Shapiro, Esquire.
Hello.
Looking
We got
particularly
from
esquire-y today.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I was in
STSU,
a courtroom this morning.
Tim CV. All right. I am Jared Kabika Miller. I am your debate coach, professor of communications. And the topic that we're talking about today, we try to take on this new sort of sub theme on certain days where we tackle the political issues on a different tectonic plate. So yeah.
It's the most reasonable way to split up the world because it's just too easy to go by continents. Got to go by tectonic plates.
Normally, I just listen to what the British tell me to do, and I just carve it up that way.
Yeah. So we're going off of this map. There are different types of maps. We already did the African plate. We started off thinking it was the continent. We're like, no, screw that. We're doing the tectonic plate. Mm-hmm. I know that there are differences of opinions about where they to draw the lines, but we're just going to kind of arbitrarily choose this one. We thought it was a pretty straightforward map.
We're going to have quite a few things to talk about when we use the Eurasian plate, going from Thailand all the way through the UK.
Well, I can't wait to do the Nazca plate and the politics of the Galapagos Islands or something like that.
Yeah, no, I'm sad I missed. I'm sad I missed my plan for the West Indian Ocean. That I'm gonna have to wait 7 months to get back to that.
All right. Oh yeah, and we're just going alphabetical too. So Africa was first, and now the Arabian Plate is next. All right. So this is actually the second go that we've had at this one because when we recorded it the first time,
I wasn't there. That's why.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why.
Well, it was before October 7th is
that too.
What it was. So there's no getting around that particular issue. I think that we ought to just tackle that one head on.
Yep.
So what I'm talking about is the Hamas attack and then the Israeli response that has resulted in basically an all-out war. That is, we're how many days are we into it now? Oh man, a couple weeks into it.
Yeah, 2.5 weeks.
Okay, unavoidable. You got to know this for debate, and so we ought to. It is a humanitarian tragedy, but if we're going to put on our debate caps for a second, we got to strategize and think about what type of things we need to know that would be most useful in a debate round. Am I skipping?
No.
Oh, okay. Is Tim skipping? Okay.
My internet was just blipping for a second.
All right.
So we can start off. I think maybe a reasonable place is right where we ended at our previous attempt at this particular subject, which was you should get to know what's going on in Israel and Palestine. There's always, stuff that comes up in debate topics, but it had not been a particularly big subject up until I wrote an extemp topic over that weekend that was, can Egypt facilitate the first major normalization of relations between the Arab League and Israel? Because those talks were happening. Like Saudi Arabia was literally sitting down with Israel, and like Egypt was at the table talking through like how can we more or less piece together a three-way treaty, and that was a normalization of relationships between the U.S., Israel, and the Arab League. Unprecedented, and that was coming up like mere days later. I want to say it was somewhere on like October 10th that was slated for, and then the attack happened. So there are a number of theories that pose that Hamas as a group was, or at least the more extremist components of it, were very, very opposed to that particular treaty. So it kind of brings up the question. So they were like, hey, if this goes through, we wouldn't get the way of the world that we want. And so thus that like launched all the attacks. So that's just one kind of theory that's out there that I've read from a couple different sources. So as far as debate goes, one of the ideas I think that come in are who is a reasonable mediator in the situation. So you've got the U.S. has a close relationship with Israel, but the U.S. is pretty strongly on the fence, right? Like they're saying like, hey, you need aid to folks that live in Gaza and now potentially aid to folks who live in the West Bank, but not calling for a ceasefire the way that the
Yeah.
UN Security Council has been doing. So you got like that's what the U.S. is doing. Entirely backing Israel because now every other Arab state is also pretty pissed at Israel the way that you're really just becoming all-out airstrikes. So the U.S. is saying now just backing Israel 100%. So from like a fiat perspective, I don't know that you can say like, the U.S. is just gonna 100% back a Palestinian state and go all out two-state solution. Like that as a fiat, I don't think is a very reasonable plan that you can go for.
Yeah.
So I start thinking like, who are other mediators? Who are other parties that might
before we even get to the, your original point of who would be a reasonable mediator.
Yeah.
Even before getting to kind of, you jump to more of like a policy kind of, the U.S. probably wouldn't back that plan. I think there's a level even before that, just to say, would a representative of the United States be a good mediator in the sense of like, there's been so much history kind of one way, right? Let's just put it this way. In law, there's something called like a conflict of interest, right? So, if someone is pot committed or philosophically aligned or whatever the case may be with one side, the other side would not want a person like that to be a mediator, because that's a person who, even the appearance or the facade that could take place could kind of diminish them as a good mediator in the sense of just looking for a body or person to be in that position. So, but to your point, Tim, you kind of took it another step further, saying that plan wouldn't be backed. I just kind of wanted to focus on the definition of what a mediator is. That doesn't necessarily mean policy at all.
Yeah, when you have like recent events where the hospital bombing and Palestinian sort of representatives canceled a meeting with the U.S. president, it's a pretty good sign that the United States is not considered somebody who's going to be mediating it. And so, working that into as well. What I think of a lot when it comes to Middle East politics in terms of debate is how you could use the information to sometimes on the negative side. Now you definitely can take these recent actions to non-unique a lot of like international wartime scenarios. Is kind of like, war's already been triggered, so like this isn't going to trigger. It's a really sort of pessimistic, nihilistic way of looking at things. It's like, well, it doesn't matter because war's already broken out and it's going to spiral out.
Yeah, that's slippery. That's dangerous though, because it's. I'm not going to say minimal. That's a bad choice of words, but in Gaza, for instance, I believe there's like 2 million plus people there. And there has been thousands dead. But could it be worse? Yeah, way worse. I'm not making light of it. I'm just saying, to say non-unique to war being started, or to say that I would just be careful with the non-unique, because it could obviously escalate.
Right. I think the link store to escalation is very easy. Like where previously Israel was like the lead domino in most link stories of like, oh, well, Israel is, tensions are hot, and if the Republicans don't get such and such, like I literally saw one round where it was a dam in the Snake River was going to trigger thermonuclear war. And it was that was like what the government team said. And like a dam in the Snake River in Idaho, not like, and it was like, oh, well, that's going to upset these Republicans, and these Republicans are going to, go hardline on this, and that's going to set off Israel, and Israel's going to preemptive strike, and that's going to lead. And it was like, okay, we're getting insane here. But now that you already do actually really like terrifyingly have that link in place, like, all right, so war is already established there. Now the next links of like surrounding, escalation or like spillage into other states is way higher. So I think that those are unfortunately higher probability links now at this point, or like impacts that can get. I think I would be more likely to grant as a judge, just because like, damn, this is not something I think anyone expected to unfold. It just is now happening.
Yeah, but that's the case. It's where the internal link scenario actually overwhelms uniqueness. That like those things, if you just say those are inevitable, like those things are going to happen.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
I see. Got it.
Yeah, like not only it's not just a higher probability. It's like it doesn't matter what we do, what your plan does. It's like it's not a unique disadvantage. It is a non-unique disadvantage that's going to happen no matter what.
Got it. Understand.
Yeah, that's why it's kind of nihilistic. You know what I mean? It's like you're just a pessimist. It's kind of like that's one of my favorite responses to like climate change affirmatives, where they're like they say we need to do this in order to like alleviate climate change, and like we passed that. It's too late. Like it's scientists like there's already publications out that say like we've already passed the threshold, the point of no return. It's just there's nothing we can do. It's going to get worse.
Well, that's the show, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Next week we're going to be discussing optimism, so hopefully that'll be a better one. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Jared, I'm glad you explained. I've heard the phrase come out a number of times, like the links overwhelm uniqueness, and I've actually never had anyone slowly explain what that means. Now I get it. Appreciate that. Thank you for the lesson.
It's kind of rare. That's why, you know what I mean. It's like when I heard it the first time, it was like I forget what the context was, but I'll never forget what it was referring to. It's kind of like. It's a way of saying non-unique, but a much more specific way of saying it. Right? It's like
it's still debatable. I mean, I'm just listening to you now, and I'm saying like, first of all, I understand what you mean. I mean, I can see how what you're saying is it's not the uniqueness level we're talking about. We're talking about the brink, the breaking point line. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's a very good argument. But I'm also just saying anyone who counters that should also know. I mean, you should be able to articulate how. You know, their plan is doing something to throw gasoline on a fire or something like that. I just mean to always call out, despite that being a good idea and pretty tricky, crafty argument, never think for a second that like that can't be at least argued against.
Yeah,
so go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry about that.
All right, let's think about other areas of the Arabian Plate. But it is impossible to ignore how Israel is affecting
the main headline.
I mean, they're centered around it. So
Egypt.
Yeah, Tim started off that way.
To move into that also constitutes a pretty big part of the plate.
Yeah.
Egypt does span a lot into the African plate, though, right? Like if we look at that tectonic map,
it does. It does, especially like the Sinai Peninsula and things like that. You know what I mean? Like, and so just it doesn't stop right at the Suez Canal. Right, that's where people sort of sometimes mark the continent, but that's not necessarily the tectonic plate.
Yeah. So because we're going by tectonic plates, we get Egypt as a subject to discuss. So in the context of Israel-Palestine stuff, Egypt has said that they're not. I mean, as of the time of this recording, Egypt is not taking in refugees from Palestine, which is already has a lot of its own kind of like story and narrative and kind of weight around that. So that's worthwhile to know, and probably some topics that could come up. But they have like at various points very briefly opened the border to allow aid through. So like that is the only port of entry open to Gaza at this point.
Right.
So that kind of can become an important debate subject to talk about as far as like, is this possible? Is this not? Well, there's one mechanism, and that is through Egypt. So I think that's a worthwhile, like kind of strategic move if you're on the negative to say, you know, any plan that the government passes, you have to go through Israel. So if you can like counterplan something in Israel, or if you can, you know, kind of give some better disadvantage as to like why Egypt wouldn't allow that, or why, you know, whatever reason, you can kind of use that as strategic knowledge, as kind of like, here's this singular fact of the world that means that no other, you know, humanitarian plan can take place without this, right?
Right.
So there's, you know, kind of interesting plans that can come out from that. Other things in Egypt besides that single port or that single border crossing?
Oh man, I wasn't even like, no, it's just Israel is overwhelming everything about Egypt.
Yeah, we talked, I think, a whole bunch about a bunch of different things previously that are all kind of awash at this point. Like I think kind of any policy progress seems to be largely on hold in much of the area.
Well, I think like Yemen is still an important thing to talk about. There is still massive amounts of malnutrition and starvation. And one of the things that we talked about before was whether or not to declare what's happening a genocide. And I think those are really interesting debates. The, declaring things under a certain category, certain war crimes carry with it political implications. One of our previous situations, we were talking about whether or not to, it was on the African topics, about whether or not to call something a coup really affects what type of humanitarian aid gets into that
Is
area.
it a government or is it a regime? I mean, those playing with the words and the terminologies and the stigmas attached to the words.
Right, and because there is actual like policy bright line of like, if something is a genocide, the UN can do X, Y, and Z things, or the US can send X, Y, and Z support. Right. But if it is not a genocide or it is not a coup, different things are triggered. So that's a kind of worthwhile debate, is like just considering each of those pieces. I think one of them that we talked about was elections that are going on. Now I'm forgetting which region the election was in.
Well, before we moved on, there's one other thing. I think one interesting discussion about genocide is the difference between genocide and ethnic cleansing. There's been a lot of discussion on social media about the difference between those two and the sort of political implications about using one and not the other. And so it forced me to come like, oh, shoot, what is the difference? You know what I mean?
There was one.
Yeah. And so ethnic cleansing is, it could be any sort of displacement of people from a region. I hope I'm doing this justice, right? So it doesn't
mean death.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily killing.
It doesn't necessarily mean death.
That could be an element of it, but the displacement is the important part. And so, like, even when Israel says, "All right, you better move. We're going to bomb this place," that could be considered ethnic cleansing. But genocide is the actual, like, trying to eradicate a people of some sort, and so that would be
earth.
Yeah. So at least that's what I saw. I've heard faint sort of whisperings of people disputing those distinctions as like being distinctions without difference. And so I'm interested in hearing what that's about, but I think that's an important thing to point out when you're talking about these things, about like those categorization. Like, genocide is illegal, but ethnic cleansing doesn't have the same legal standing. Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear about what Jared does with his free time, but I am glad that someone is on it. Some kinky stuff you're looking into, Jared. Let me tell you, man.
It's like you can say it's not technically, and then fill in the blank. He loves his little air quotes out of sticky situations.
Yeah, go ahead.
When in Rome.
Totally left turn direction topic that I think is coming up a whole ton before all the shit hit the fan was Saudi Arabia. So OPEC, I think you can get into lots of discussions and topics about oil. Saudi Arabia and Russia working together, like in terms of controlling global oil prices. So both Saudi and Russia agreed to limit the amount of oil that they sold so as to control prices, like to keep it at a certain rate going into winter, which is kind of insane that is possible and legal. I mean, like, yeah, they control a huge percentage of the world's oil, but to like decide to throttle, and I would see them as competitors, right? Of like, they are each separately large distributors of oil, and yet they like agree together. Yeah, the global market needs to do this thing, so therefore let's open up the taps or tighten them down. So like their recent agreement to tighten down and sell less oil is wild, but interesting. I think it's so easy to be like, oh, Russia, they're the enemies of the bad guy, but forgetting that like there's tons of countries that still work with them even at this moment.
Well, I watched the interesting thing how when the United States is sanctioning Russia and with Ukraine and all that stuff going on, there's such a massive provider of oil that like there were concerns as to the stability of the world's economy by just shutting down any and all economic trade, I guess, with other nations, even though the United States was going to be boycotting, whatever the word is, sanctioning them economically. And I thought that was a really interesting discussion, being like, very long term, and it's more long term seeing, being like, if you want to just pull the plug on, the economic stability of half the countries in the world, then just, the implications of it go far beyond, the United States, Russia, Ukraine specific issue once you start going that far. I mean,
Russia's
and also, I'm sorry, one more thing. You're right, Tim. Between the Saudis and the Russians, that's probably close to 80% of the Earth's oil being delivered to people right now. So, I mean, realistically, the same question would go: why does AT&T and Verizon have, it's a monopoly? You know what I mean? They have very monopolistic type tendencies, and at some point, when you're that big of a dog in the field, like, they can kind of agree to manipulate markets for whatever reasons they may have, and if they're aligned in that, in that one aspect of their relationship with the world, then it makes sense why, at least to me, why that would happen. I mean, whether the effect. Yeah, go ahead, Jared. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, Russia's a big player, influence in the Middle East for sure. The Arabian Plate, especially with Syria, because remember when Syria fell into its civil war, Russia was one of the few countries that was backing the
Assad regime,
the power installed, not the rebels. And so most other like Western nations were kind of siding, not too much, but siding somewhat with the rebels in Syria. And right away, Syria got kicked out of the Arab League, and they were kind of a pariah. But just recently, they got admitted back into the Arab League, and it seemed like things were starting to normalize with Syria. But now Israel comes out, and just the other day, I think it was Syria is reporting that some of the bombs that Israel is dropping on the West Bank is hitting their airports in Aleppo.
And Damascus. It completely crippled the Damascus airport as well.
Right, and so now what used to be sort of a decade-long civil war now becomes a part of the Israeli conflict, and that's something that could link into like a Russia disadvantage as well. You start linking it through that particular relationship.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what do you have to say about that?
I don't have anything to add on the subject of Syria.
All right.
I was just going to say, of all the tectonic plates that we will be discussing, you can't pick a country on this plate that doesn't have front headline news coming out. I mean, probably your whole life, man. You don't even want to know what they're doing. Yeah.
Here's the good stuff. This is what I love as far as like debate. Sometimes you've got really sweet plans. So quick aside, one thing that we love to run whenever we had Middle Eastern topics was just based on kind of whatever the government was coming out with as a plan. We would run an argument called Orientalism. So it's written by Edward Said, and the argument that when the British and the Dutch and the French kind of like divided up the world in all of their aggressive colonialism, they pretty much called like everything from Morocco to like Iran the same thing. They're like, oh, that's just the Orient. Or I guess like all the way through to China, I should say, like just the Orient. And so it's similarly that language is used to very like streamline the way that the world talks about the Middle East. Like Morocco is not the same as Egypt, is not the same as Jordan, is not the same as, Iraq. Like those are very, very different states, despite them like, North Africa, but it's still like part of the Arab League, right? So we start kind of molding these things together. So it's using similar language to talk about a very diverse group. So that's where we would go for Orientalism, like, hey, we're over boiling down, we're oversimplifying what is a really diverse kind of base here. So going with Oman as a counterplan would be really like a fun direction, because Oman is a very peaceful, extremely trade-oriented, super progressive state. Now, at that said, they also still are an authoritarian, like one-party rule. The people love the leader, though, like because there's not like, you go disappear, like you disappear if you speak out against. Now, there's not multiple parties that are vying for power, but they also have like higher education and like a lot of like equal rights for women. And it's because they're on the coast and separated by a ton of mountains. So they've historically always had to trade a lot with the African continent, with the Indian continent, or subcontinent, doing a lot of this. Like they're only survive basically. They do have a lot of oil, but they are really like traders. And so their king that's like been in power since like the 70s, but people are like really stoked on him, is very in support of like education and how do they change their economy from one dependent on oil to other things. So like investing in technology, investing in trade, and all kinds of stuff. So fun direction. They're a different sect of Islam than much of the rest of the Arab League, but it's a cool place you can run plans that it's like, yeah, you don't get to link to like regional instability. Like, nope, Oman's totally stable and chill, and their economy's going fine. So useful little direction, like you can go as a kick out.
Yeah, it would. You do have to kind of look into it to find some criticism. Not too hard. It's not too hard to find criticism of Oman, but most of the headlines I'm seeing is like, look at this business deal they put together. Look at this thing. Look how they're transitioning to, clean energy.
Right.
And so, yeah, but I mean, there's definitely a few horror stories that come up in reference to it. So there's still some room, but again, that would require for the negative to really put some time and effort into it, because they can't. Yeah, it does kind of help with the Orientalism critique. If you run,
you could almost kind of put like a fiat abuse on whatever the affirmative runs, especially if it's Israel, Palestine, or some of these very like it's really unknown, or there's like Jared also said, kind of like you've already cut Brinks out due to like the direction things are heading, and then run your Oman counter plan, because that you at least have hopefully some stability to base your fiat on, instead of working within the framework of just so much turmoil. And I don't know how else to say it. I mean, there's literally personal opinion that could come into this. I mean, people are so a lot of people, I should say, are so opinionated that it sounds weird, but you need to know your judge. You need to be very careful,
Sure.
in this type of debate, because the best debater in the world, if you're saying something that's just starkly opposed to what some judge believes, even though they're not supposed to vote that way, I mean, as far as a debate round goes, you know what I mean? As far as that goes, I'm not saying, actually implementing policy. Just, Oman is a good place to kind of start with, getting out of some of the weeds that you're ultimately going to end up in, and maybe some pitfalls that you don't even know about.
Sure.
Lebanon is also important. I think that they are probably one of the most active in terms of forming a coalition with Hamas, right? So Hezbollah out of Lebanon is starting to sort of activate these coalitions with. I even see something in Al Jazeera about forming an axis of resistance to the war on Gaza with Hamas and Islamic Jihad. So both of all of whom are recognized as.
I think there's lots of displaced Palestinians in Lebanon. I think that's a
Well, I mean,
big reason for that.
It was. I think it's really worth reading the something I really had no idea of until doing a little bit more reading into it, is the number of factions that have control in Palestine. It's not like the Republicans and the Democrats. It is a very long list of like different sects and different groups that are not just like this faith necessarily, or just this like political party. There are some like militant groups, there's some financial groups, there's some business organizations, there are some actual political parties that have different wings. So like Hezbollah is another one that is predominantly more in the West Bank area, but they've got a ton of strong ties to and factions in Iran. So like that's where you end up with like even more link story, is with like Hezbollah ties to Iranian funding or backing or whatever. So I think like looking at where those different support pieces come, two things I didn't want to leave out were the UAE, so United Arab Emirates, and Qatar tend to be the least likely to engage in combat type things. They're at the edge of the peninsula and super oil rich. So like the richest states in the Arab League. I mean, Saudi might be up there too, but they have very small countries, but
they got a lot of backing, if you know what I mean. When they got that
like
oil,
a lot of,
you know what I mean.
good
There's a
handful of
reason
billionaires
why
there.
people don't just go over there immediately. There's like,
So I mean, they're like easily leveraged in plans or like in understanding just topics as like the bank or the financier behind some particular thing. So they're really useful actors. I've seen a lot of very successful plans use Qatar as an actor or use the UAE as an actor because they got the finance to do stuff and the stability, but they're not as regionally vulnerable. So they are like trading partners with a ton of countries. They've got a lot of sectors besides just oil, like tourism still fuels a lot of stuff, and they're trying to transition away from oil, but they are, like in the hostage release with Iran, right? Like that was mediated through, or it was Korean money mediated through Qatar to Iran, like just wild stuff like that keeps going back and forth. So Qatar is kind of this useful linchpin to a lot of other stuff.
Just be careful though, because I'm kind of circling all the way back to the beginning. We're talking about mediators, and like I think all of these could maybe be alternatives to the United States expressly. Sure. But that being said, I mean, Tim, every country you just rattled off right now between Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, like they have backing from a certain country called the United States, which for all of the reasons I already discussed at the top of case would likely be as a maybe, they're not necessarily seen in the best of light by, I think, some of the people who are doing some of the fighting on the ground. So I just, those are arguments that could be made in a debate round as to why one of these countries could also not be a good mediator or may not be bending the ear of some of the people who are doing the fighting.
Well, it is, it is a contentious situation. It makes it really difficult to have, clear debates on it. I think it's going to be definitely dominating the, just discussions about international relations and what's going to trigger this and that, what direction we're going.
And hopefully the bleakest thing we ever discuss on this here podcast.
Yeah,
so
no, I in my experience with debate, like any resolution that directly confronted some of these issues would be very tailored, I would imagine. I don't think they would throw something just so polarizing into a round for a lot of the reasons we've just talked about. I mean, because typically debate, we talk about a lot of, very, headline critical things and some things that are a little edgy, but, this is really so hot. Like I could imagine that, any sort of, tournament director or the framer, what do we call framers intent, type stuff like that. They're likely going to tailor this to a very specific thing to try to at least give two sides that have some ground to talk about without diving headfirst into like a philosophical nightmare with a judge or another team or someone in the room. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
All right. Well, important stuff to know, but we'll be back with some other topics, not so heavy in the near future. All right. Hey, it's Matt, Tim, and Jared for DebateSensei. We'll see you.